Okay, Madam Chair, we are ready to begin.
Thank you, Teresa. Good afternoon. This is the September 16th, 2020 meeting of the Land Management Ordinance Committee of the Planning Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Teresa, are we in compliance with FOIA?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
Could you please call roll call?
Yes. Mr. Scanlon?
Here.
Mr. Theodore?
Here.
Ms. McGowan?
Here. Does staff have any changes to the agenda?
No, we don't.
Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Committee members, if you have any changes when Teresa calls on you to vote, please state them. Otherwise, vote yes to approve the agenda. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mr. Scanlon?
Yes, here.
Mr. Theodore?
Yes.
Ms. McGowan?
Yes. Now for the minutes of the special meeting of August 11th, 2020. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the August 11th, 2020 meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, if you have any changes, please state those changes. Otherwise, when Teresa calls, please vote yes or no. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mr. Scanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Theodore?
Yes.
Ms. McGowan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Citizen comments. Teresa, can you please address public comments submitted?
Yes, ma'am. Public comments concerning today's agenda item were to be submitted electronically via the town's online portal. The portal closed at noon yesterday, and all comments were provided to the committee for review and made a part of the official record. Citizens could also sign up to provide public comment by phone during today's meeting. The sign-up period closed at noon yesterday, and one citizen requested to participate.
Okay, thank you. Unfinished business, there's none. We'll move on to new business. Review of Historic Neighborhoods Preservation Overlay, HNP-O District. Dr. Dubose, would you like to make a presentation, please?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to go a little bit through how we got here and then go ahead and go through the amendments. And if there are any questions, just let me know as I'm going through. So in November 2019, Town Council approved a framework that was put together for the Gullah Geechee project report, and they approved the framework that has the top recommendations. And this overlay district was considered to be the most important thing that needed to go through. So here we are working to try to preserve the remaining Gullah properties on the island. So this addresses communal living traditions, increase in density, adjustments to reduce buffer setbacks and feet for access, increase impervious surfaces, and allow for increased height. So I'd like to go through this summary if you can. It's so there are adjustments made to the summary table that include two new uses for family compound and family subdivision. What that entails is the family compound is a single parcel that allows for multiple homes to be put on this one parcel. And in this section, you'll notice that there is its own definition for family. So this requires a person who is related to the property owner by blood, marriage, or legal adoption. And this is defined in the other section as we go through. So applications for family compound will only be allowed, we're proposing in this proposed overlay district. There's also a procedure for establishing the family compound, and These will be considered first as for development approval, as that's one of the recommendations that that applications from this district go through first. That's to mitigate cost in trying to establish these uses. As you can see in 3, it talks about the review procedure. For a family compound, we're asking for a pre-application conference. There's rules for submittal, and of course the staff review and action. If you turn to page 5, it talks about the review standards. There's been changes made, there's been inclusion of this, the approval, the expiration, and how it's amended. I'd like to go through on page 6 what family subdivision is. This is different from the family compound in that instead of the single parcel, you are subdividing these parcels, and we're using the same definition of family for this this use. And so this, again, if you look at section 1, to establish this as a family subdivision, no land should be transferred or offered for sale until the final plat of the subdivision has been approved. And it also requires that that person be in the same family. And it has, and section 3 has the subdivision review procedure for a pre-application conference, application submittal. Changes have been to inclusion of the staff review and action. Post-action and limitations are also included. And again, the family subdivision should be reviewed first. And there needs to be an affidavit submitted to show that you're going to be in the same family. There's a section that's been included for effective approval, expiration, and amendment. If you turn to page 9, you will see that there have been some changes, updates made to the RM4 district. Before I even get to that, the RM4 is proposed to be changed to RM6 for areas within the overlay district. But there's still, the RM4 will address impervious cover for properties. If you look in the footnote, for properties located within the district shall be 45%, and the maximum building height for properties located in the district shall be 45 feet. So those changes have been made for that, that zoning. The proposed RM6 is included in the the LMO amendments. Excuse me. So the purpose of this is to allow increased density for 6 units per acre. So there's a section that includes residential uses, the public, civic, institutional, educational uses have been included. Other commercial services and other uses have also been included for this RM6 district. So again, this is 6 dwelling units per acre and 8 dwelling units per acre. It will be allowed if for at least 5 acres. For any non-residential structure, it's a gross floor area of 6,000 feet. And all maximum building height within the RM6 district is 45 feet. And maximum impervious cover for all except for single family is 35%. And the minimum open space for residential subdivision is 16%. The next section is the RM8. These are the areas that are going to be, the base zoning also covers RM8 within the historic area. So those changes have been made to the LMO. So if you look at the bottom in the footnote, it talks about the maximum impervious cover located within the districts shall be 45%. So that part's been updated as well. Also, updates are in the RM12, and that shall be 45% also. And if you notice on page 14, there's a marshfront district along major arterials. Under the residential section, staff is proposing that along major arterials, the 4 DU be increased to 8 DU. And again, because neighborhood commercial is also a base district within the overlay, those updates have been made in the footnote to talk about maximum building height to be 45 feet. Page 16 includes the applicability and purpose of the overlay district. So it talks about the purpose of it, which is to be able to pass land to future generations, which is very prevalent in the districts that we're discussing. And this is to allow for increased development potential, which is why staff is proposing the density increase for the Marshfront district and for the RM6 district to be included. So also this covers any applications for workforce housing. So that's also included in this. And also we're referring to the use of family when we're talking about this district. Page 17 tells you where these areas will cover. As you can see, the Historic Neighborhoods Preservation Overlay covers all of the historic areas of Hilton Head, and that's delineated in the map. This is also noted on page 18 because we weren't able to do it on one page, but these 2 pages refer to where these historic areas are and what the districts, where the districts will be. Page 19 discusses district regulations, the setbacks, the buffers. So the major arterial route will be 50 feet. The minor arterial is proposed to be 25 feet and all other streets 10 feet. And for an access easement setback to be 5 feet. And then it also talks about adjacent use setbacks in number 2, 5 feet is required between 2 single-family uses, and all setbacks are reduced by 10 feet from what is required, what's currently required. And at this point, I actually would like to refer to Johaida and Jeff to talk about the setback requirements or the access requirements, excuse me, for this this section because they have more to contribute to this section.
Okay. Ms. Pfister?
Sure. So part of what fire rescue, any kind of new development that gets applied for on the island, there is at least a 20-foot minimum requirement for access. So we ask that still remain for these properties as well. You know, I'll say up front that no matter what, fire rescue is going to get to where we need to get to, but the quicker that we can get there and the better that access is, the better turnout there is for in the end for a fire or for a medical emergency. So like I said, the fire code requires access to be 20 feet, and so that is what we're asking to remain for these properties as well.
Thank you. Dr. Dubose? Okay. Mr. Bucklew, did you want to speak? Your mic's not on.
Okay, good. Hi, I'm Jeff Bucklew, the town engineer, and a few of the concerns I just wanted to raise for your awareness regarding these issues in reducing the width of the right-of-way or access easement. If that's reduced down to 20 feet, the LMO requires a two-way road be 20 feet wide. So the roadway surface itself will be 20 feet. Typically in a right-of-way, the associated roadway infrastructure goes in there as well. So that could be roadway shoulders, storm drainage, other utilities, etc. So there's a concern that if it is only 20 feet wide and the roadway surface takes up that 20 feet, there won't be sufficient room for shoulders or drainage. You know, part of the LMO requirements talk about the town engineer must approve drainage systems on private streets. And so thus it would be very difficult to, you know, design and construct drainage within that 20 foot if the road is taking up the 20 foot. There are ways to do it, but they may be more expensive. For instance, you could have an inverted crown road shaped like a V and run storm drainage pipes and catch basins down the center. That's more expensive. Typically, it's just shoulders and swells on the sides. So that's a concern. And, you know, with our dirt road paving program, we have a program whereby a qualifying private unpaved road, the property owners can donate either land in fee simple for a public right-of-way or rights to an existing right-of-way or easement to the town. And once it's a public right-of-way, we will pave it and maintain it in perpetuity. And if some of these roads are built with such a limited right-of-way and reduced setbacks such that buildings and structures are very close to the road, in the future, if the residents along that road wish to convey that road to the town to establish a public right-of-way, it may be very difficult to get the width we need and to make the proper improvements. So these are things just that I'm bringing up for your awareness.
Thank you.
Yes.
Dr. DeBose, you want to continue?
Yes, thank you. I apologize. I jumped ahead of the gun a little bit. This is in reference to the family compound and family subdivision being 20 feet for width for access. Staff is proposing changes that for 30 foot for the subdivision and 20 feet for the compound. Compound is several houses on one lot where you can potentially put other access in, but when you're dealing with a subdivision, it's such a fixed it's such a fixed driveway that we need to make that width a little wider. So there is what's presented, but what the staff is recommending for those two parts. And I wanted to say that before I continued with the buffer section. And we can cover that again as we get to the talk about the family compound and family subdivision.
Just so I have it clear, then are
Sure.
you talking about a revision to the draft that we have?
We're talking about just trying to hear what we asked
The fire and
fire rescue and Mr. Bucklew in here to explain why it's important to consider the width when we're talking about those two uses, the family compound and the family subdivision.
okay.
And hopefully that would be considered. I think Jennifer wants to jump into.
Sorry, Jennifer Ray for the record. I just want to jump in and explain that we're not proposing something different than what's in your packet. We did, and we brought to the task force a recommendation of 30-foot right-of-way for the family subdivision. The task force recommended that go down to 20. So that's what we put in your packet. What you have in front of you has what the task force recommended. But we just want you to know that we have concerns. Not only does community development, but engineering and fire rescue have concerns about going down to that small of an access. So we just wanted to bring that to the LMO committee's attention today so you can consider that, but know where we were coming from versus where the task force was coming from. But that's what we brought to you, is what the task force's recommendation was.
Thank you. Right. Dr. DeBose, you want to continue?
Sure.
Thank you.
So if we look at section B, there's a reduce in the buffers, starting with the minor arterial. We're looking at 15 feet. For single family, using the least amount of plantings, but if you're doing multifamily, going to the maximum amount of plantings that are already in the LMO. On page 20, and I think a little, yes. For all other streets, going down to 10 feet for the buffers. For single family, the least amount of plantings, and for non-single family, the increased plantings, and for an access easement, we're proposing no buffer be put in for that. For adjacent use buffers, those won't apply if you're talking about the same, being adjacent to the same classification. But others, buffers should include the minimum planting requirements. For impervious cover of the lot should be 45%, except for development within light commercial, marshfront, Mitchellville, neighborhood commercial, resort development, Stony, and waterfront mixed-use districts. So for impervious cover requirements, we'll refer to the section 16-3-105 for that. Building height should be 45 feet, except for development in Mitchellville, resort development, and waterfront mixed use. And for building height in other areas, to see those certain sections for that. Access, this is what we were talking about before. Within a family subdivision shall be provided in the up to the point of development, where before you had to put it all in. So this relieves the burden of one person having to put in all of the access. And access to dwelling units within the family compound. Again, this is 20-foot wide easement constructed of an all-weather driving surface. We also put in a wetlands protection area section on pages 20 and 21 for these areas. This covers also number 4, allowable uses and activities, and a section for the review of applications, which will be expedited. And if you see on page 22, this goes through the use standards. And those 2 uses are included. Workforce housing on page 23 includes the RM6 district. So those changes have been made in updating to other commercial services in the RM6 district. And changes to include RM6 for the boat ramp, docking facilities, and marinas. Page 24 talks about the density. It shows the density that the parcels within the overlay district will be not, it won't be rounded down, meaning that it'll be rounded up to include, it will be, the density calculation will be rounded up instead of rounded down. The general definitions are also included for family compound and family subdivision. So that's been added in to chapter 10. Page 25 includes the family compound for the appendix. So those regulations will be put in for that to talk about application, the consent, the eligibility, the deed, the boundary plat that's required, written narrative, site development plan, approval certifications and recommendations, and other requirements is that the infrastructure and access must be installed to serve each structure in the order each structure is constructed. Page 28 talks about the regulations for the family subdivision. Again, the application, what's needed for the plat, the certificate of owner's consent, eligibility, certification of title source, certificate of title and reference, street names and development names required, subdivision and phases, stormwater management, and under other items, again, access and infrastructure to be installed to serve each structure in the order it's been constructed. And also prior to the sale within the family subdivision to non-family members, it's asking that the subdivision application, the full subdivision application be submitted before any sale to non-family members. And other applicable items for the family compound is also a part of this other items. These are all the LMO amendments we're asking for. And right now I'm ready to answer any questions that you might have.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Dubose. Committee members, I'll go. Mr. Scanlon, do you have some questions you'd like to raise?
Just a question. It seems that the maximum impervious fluctuates quite a bit from like 35% up to 60%. I'm just wondering, in other new developments that would be outside of these territories, it's I think roughly 50% is what we require for say townhouses and things of that nature. Why the wide variance on the maximum impervious? I just wondered what that's all about.
The maximum impervious cover will not be reduced for areas that already have a wider impervious cover. This just brings it up to the well, I'm going to refer to Terry on that one.
Hi, committee members. It's Terry Lewis. So the impervious coverage does vary from district to district. Starting with the residential districts, it's fairly low, 35%, all the way up to, like you were talking about, 60% in the higher density districts. And that's to enable some of that higher density to occur. We weren't proposing to, like Cherie said, we're not proposing to lower those. That's why you see a reference to the waterfront mixed use district and the resort development. Some of those other districts, you just see a reference to it and it doesn't say that those numbers, that those impervious surfaces will change. They'll remain the same that they are. We're just looking to, since we're increasing the density in these residential districts, that's why we're looking to bring that impervious coverage up a little bit so that it accommodates that density increase.
Not a big issue. I just wondered why okay, fair enough.
Any other questions right now, Mike?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Todd, do you have any questions for the staff?
Well, serve on the task force, so I'm familiar with a lot of the recommendations. I was just kind of curious on the right of way. Is part of the feedback on the 20-foot right of way is it's a not only a maintenance issue, but it's a safety issue.
That's correct. You want to have your access wide enough for to get your emergency vehicles through there. Um, as Johanna said, they will always try to get to you. They will always get to you, but it's a matter of time, a matter of timing and how they get to you. So the wider they can make that access, that would increase the safety.
So I just wonder if it's a 20-foot, is it an easement? And if it's a right of way, does it need to be something like 30 feet, something wider?
That's correct.
And I see Peter's on there. Center swale drains in the road are not always a great solution because they tend to plug up and become giant puddles. That'd probably be one of my only concerns is when it's an official right of way is 20 feet is fairly narrow. When you're trying to get utilities and it becomes public land basically.
Any other questions right now, Todd?
That's it. That's it.
Okay. Okay, I have a few questions, and I guess I'll pick up on the access. Is there a definition of access or a definition of what is entailed as an all-weather driving surface in the code? I mean, maybe I should just state, it seems that there should be.
We're looking it up right now
All
to
right.
give you the exact materials.
Okay. Then I'll make a simple question if this makes sense. If I can find where it is. On Exhibit B, page 4 and page 6, you use the terminology about a person dwelling in the unit. I think maybe it should be more appropriate to be person living in the unit, since we have a definition of dwelling in the code, which means something completely, means a home or something. Do you see where I'm talking about that?
Yes, ma'am.
Because a question I have I know this has been a long process, and a lot of this here is dealing with the economic sustainability for the Gullah Geechee culture. Is there any safeguards for the Gullah cultural heritage sites that are located within these zoned areas?
I'm sorry. What's the question again?
This whole area, we have identified in our reports and in the Gullah cultural tours, all the Gullah cultural heritage sites.
Yes.
And is the task force confident that these amendments are not going to result in us losing those cultural sites?
Well, that's actually the aim, is trying to make sure that the culture is preserved and not lost. So just with with what's proposed here, it will be done with that preservation in mind.
Then, question: what happens? What happens when the property, a family subdivision is sold to non-family members, what happens? What regulations are triggered at that point?
Right.
It's just-
If you're in a subdivision and the subdivision is sold to someone who is a non-family, then that subdivision is subjected to following the regular subdivision requirements that are currently in the LMO.
So does that mean that if a subdivision has been built by family members and built and lived for a couple years, and then they decide to sell, that it has to be upgraded?
Yes.
And what's the mechanism for that? The trigger, how does the town know that that's happening?
That's actually something I would have to look at and be able to respond at it, to research that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Leslie,
Yes, of
okay if I ask Levon a question?
course, go right ahead.
Levon, I was reading this list from the Native Island Leadership. One of the second to last item says 5-year hold. The 5-year hold for sale or lease of the property outside the family should be removed. That almost sounds like let's take advantage of the this district and the incentives, but then you could sell it off if you take that hold off. Is that my understanding?
Todd, the discussion, Levon Stevens for the record. Todd, that discussion was based around not having a number, whatever it was, 5 years or 3 years, kind of to the family not being able to do what they perhaps would like to do in the future.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, all of that is a possibility.
Is it almost like this becomes an incentive to kind of take advantage of capacity of the land and move on?
I think that it's also related to the earlier question, that if it is sold to someone that is not a family member,
Yeah.
these overlay district, these things will not, they will not be able to take advantage of that, won't have that classification anymore. I think that's part of the answer, and as Dr. DeBose says, she may have to look a little deeper into that.
Okay.
But there's certain, to answer Leslie's question, there's certain things that will trigger the status of it being in an overlay district. And if those things are not met, then it goes back, as Dr. DeBose says, to just the regular LMO guidance. That's how I understand it.
If I can, if you sell it, you're still in the overlay, so you still have the advantage of the reduced buffers, the setbacks, and access. What you just won't have with subdivision is that you would be subjected to those regulations. Also, I have the answer to your question about the access. So access actually means the right or ability of pedestrians, vehicles, and boats to enter and leave property. And the all-weather driving surface, that's a surface capable of supporting the load of a fire apparatus weighing at least 60,000 pounds.
All right, so that's in the code presently?
That is presently in the LMO.
All right. Okay, that's helpful. One other, I don't know if any of the fire representatives here, but were there concerns about the 5-foot distance between buildings? Is there a need for those buildings to be built to a different standard with a firewall on that side, or is that not a concern?
Joe Hardick, Mr. Fire Marshal. That actually is a better question for the building department, because there are requirements in the building code for what the construction has to be and how close they can be together. But the closer they are, depending on height and those types of things, like using ladders, the closer they are together, the harder it does get for us to have to work between them. So, we always want more space, but we'll work within the confines that we're given.
Okay, Todd, Peter?
Kristen.
Yeah, I had a couple of clarifying questions to ask. The 20-foot right-of-way we're talking about, is that within the family compound that we're talking about, or is that actually a road right-of-way?
It's both.
It's both.
Yes.
Okay. And okay, so the 20-foot right-of-way.
Wait a minute, I need to clarify that minute. The 20-foot right-of-way is both in the subdivision, the family subdivision and family compound is what was proposed.
Okay, and is the setback,
That's easement, it's an access.
is the 10 feet measured from the edge of that right-of-way? The setback?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so now, is there any room for utilities in that right of way that wouldn't be used as roadbed? That would be a concern. And Jeff brought it up before with drainage, but my concern is you have water, you have sewer, you have utilities. If you place those in the right of way that I assume at some point would be paved, you're going to have all of that infrastructure underneath a paved surface, which is not ideal.
Right.
And the question about that Jeff brought up about using a reverse crown road, I can speak from experience, having inherited many reverse crown roads. They are prone to terrible flooding in this environment, because we have so much tree canopy and so many pine trees and so many leaves, they clog, and unless you have someone there to constantly clear them, you will flood the road and you will flood homes using that technique. You really, the ideal situation would be to use a gutter system and a ditch on either side of the road to move that water away. The other concern I have is Johaida brought up is the 5-foot setback between buildings. Is that just 5 feet between each building, or is it 5 feet cumulative? So it's actually 10 feet that is in between each structure.
Yes, each building is 5 feet.
All right, so there'd be 10 feet.
It will be 10 feet.
Yeah, the other thing, Doctor, that you need to bring up and look at, if you bring it that close, you may need to have some type of easement where folks need to maintain those buildings, everything from painting to roofing. You're going to need more than 5 feet to get ladders and scaffolds and work persons in to work on those buildings. So, if you don't build that into that type of an agreement, you're going to down the road end up with folks arguing amongst each other who's on whose property, for things like simple maintenance. And then the last question I have is, and I think Todd brought this up, if a native island family develops a piece of property under the overlay district guidelines, and they complete that development and then sell the property to a non-native island entity, you had indicated that they would still be in the overlay district. I assume that they wouldn't have to revert back and tear down the structures that were built, that they would be somehow grandfathered in, but once those structured would be um, uh, in any way altered to a certain percentage, they would have to bring into current LMO standards. Would that be the case?
Yeah, I believe so, Peter.
Yeah, so I think the thing that's a little bit confusing is that with the family subdivision, it's what a lot of people have called in the past a paper subdivision. So that instead of putting in all the infrastructure before at the beginning, you can put it in as you're developing it. So say I'm in the overlay, I can subdivide my parcel and all of you can have a parcel, but if I'm the only one that's building the first house, I only have to build the road to that first house, the infrastructure to that first one. And then the next one of you that builds has to go farther and farther. But if I decide to sell it and you, my family, aren't going to live on it anymore, then whoever I'm selling it to has got to come in and put in all the infrastructure just like they would have had to if it wasn't a family subdivision in the overlay.
Okay, and
Does that make sense?
that's speaking to a parcel of land that has not been completely developed. And
Yes.
I'm speaking to a parcel of land that has been completely developed and then sold.
Yes, then we would not make you tear down those buildings and scoot them back in because your setbacks and buffers would be the same.
Well,
Really, the thing that when Sharice was mentioning about having to bring it up to speed or, up to that standard if you sold it, that's referring more to the subdivision or the compound where you're not having to do everything day one like a developer or property owner would that's not in the overlay.
and this would be a question for LaVarn and Dr. Desbose and Todd. What was the intent to allow a Native Island family to develop their property in full, and then and obviously taking advantage of the higher densities, which would increase the value of the property, and then sell it to a non-Native Island entity, and they would be grandfathered in, and obviously the Native Island family would have economically benefited from that, but it would no longer be in the Native Island family. What was that the intent to allow them to benefit financially? And I'm not against that. I just want to know if that was the intent.
This is Levon. I'm happy to jump in. Yeah, I believe that was the intent, Peter, was to allow folks to benefit if they chose to do so economically and not be held to whatever that is, a 5-year hold. I remember that as part of the discussion. And
because that goes back to Todd's point, holding on to that asset for 5 years and keeping it in the family before they would be eligible to sell it. But if the intent is to make that family economically better off, I'm okay with that. I just want to know that up front that was the intent.
yeah, I think that there was staff's intent to put that in there to help with the preservation piece. Jennifer Ray is going to speak to that.
And
Yeah.
my only concern with that, LaVarn, from preserving the culture, is that motivation for a Native Island family to develop their parcel, take advantage of the increased development rights, and then sell to a non-Native Island member, and then we lose that Native Island family from that, and that land is removed from the overlay district and removed from the Native Island register. Are we accelerating by doing that the number of Native Island families that would sell out and leave?
Well, if I can jump in with a couple things. Back when the consultant was here and we were having all the public meetings and listening to the community, part of the concern that we heard was I want to be able, I have this property, it's been in my family. I want to be able to pass it on to my
Right.
kids, but it would be a hardship for me to have to subdivide it and put in all that infrastructure when my kids are not ready to live there. So is there a way that I could go on and subdivide it so that I'm passing it on, keeping it in the family, passing it on for future generations, and then when they're ready, they can build, the infrastructure and live on that property. And that's also then getting at the 5-year hold that was originally on there because of the fear that if people had higher development potential that they might sell it, and then that's not really preserving it, so to speak. At some point along the way, we kind of melded those two things because the other hand was wanting to be able to recognize a higher economic value from land because land is money. That's, one of the benefits of being a landowner is that you could potentially financially benefit from your property, and the historic overlay neighborhoods may not have had as much ability to do that over time as other parts of the island. So it's kind of a fine line, and we wrestle with it here on staff and saying, are we preserving or are we providing that economic ability? And so it's really both. But just to clarify, because I've heard it several times, if a person that owns the property in the overlay sells it, if Sharice sells it to me, it's still in the overlay. Just because I'm not a native islander, I'm not Gullah Geechee, it is still part of the overlay. We are proposing to rezone that property, not to the person. So it would still be in there. So if she sold it to me, I could develop it at the same standards that we're talking about in here. So just to clarify, doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but that we can't do it based on race, gender. You can't zone that way. It's got to be for the neighborhood.
And that's a little bit different than what we heard earlier, where it would revert back to the original zoning. So the zoning would stay on, the overlay district zoning would stay on. And LaVaughn, you understand, my concern that, we're trying to preserve the Native Island culture. And, it's a balance. I get it, but we need to know going in, there is that potential that, individual Native Islanders may take advantage of this, develop the property to its fullest potential, or as I've just heard, basically sell it and give somebody else the development rights, and we lose that Native Island family. And
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. I think in our meeting, in our discussion, it was to give the option to the family if they wanted to benefit economically from the density and those things in the overlay district. We are already losing land, either be through tax sales or situations like you just described, where developers have come in and bought properties at a much lower price and develop it, and they're in historic neighborhoods anyway. So if anybody's going to benefit from it, then yeah, it's a delicate balance, like Jennifer says. But if anybody's going to benefit from it, it should be, those folks in those historic neighborhoods.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I just want to be upfront, as we go through this process, what the potential is, and I have no problem that the landowner would benefit. But we also need to bear in mind that we could be down the road further, as you said, further losing Native Islanders.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a potential, and it is an ongoing situation with some other things that are happening now. It's also a general statement about the one size doesn't always fit all. We try to do the best we can, generally speaking, and most folks will be able to take advantage of it and maybe get some relief. There's always situations where somebody doesn't want to do that, or even presently now where developers have been able to come in and purchase those properties, and we think we've benefited, and we find out it's worth 50 times more than what we sold it for. So that's the discussion, and that is the balance that we're trying to figure out here.
Good work.
Any other? Yeah. Who's speaking? At this point, I'm going to take public comment. Teresa, is Philip Smith on the line?
Yes, yes, he is on the line.
Yes, I am.
Hello, Mr. Smith. We welcome your input. We're set up with 3 minutes to address the committee on this matter, so please go ahead.
Madam Chair, he seemed to have dropped from the call.
All right.
Maybe we'll give him a minute or so to get back on.
This is the same gentleman that filled out a comment as
Yes.
well, right?
Yes, I believe it is. Yes.
Madam Chair, if you'd like, we could circle back to him
Okay.
if there's still time.
Sure.
If I may, while you're waiting, the other part of that discussion was about the 20 feet in the family subdivision and the compounds.
Yes.
We thought that we were trying to just be consistent with that number. And again, it was also trying to get as much use out of a piece of property as we possibly could. And that's why we recommended or suggested the 20 feet as opposed to the 25 or the 30 feet access.
Now, Dr. DuBose, Teresa, is that our call?
Yes, it is.
Okay, why don't we go ahead?
Mr. Smith, are you on the line?
I think I was disconnected.
Yes, welcome back. If you could, you have 3 minutes to address the committee. We'd like to hear what you have to say, so go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm pretty much amazed by the conversation right now. You all have changed my opinion on another thing. I was calling originally to discuss the home use part of this, which I haven't heard any discussion about at all. No one's discussed that, and that's our biggest issue with it. I want to invite each and every one of you. I just took a helicopter ride the other day and looked over the marsh area here where we're being destroyed by an illegal trucking company that's being pushed by the committee, Carolina Trucking, which is destroying the environment. We have people that are supposedly for the environment on both boards, council members and the LMO board. And I can look out my back window right now and show you an area of the marsh that's adjacent to 584 Spanish Wells Road and show you where it's being destroyed. No one wants to come out and look at it. We've invited everybody. I would like to invite each and every one of these members of this committee, before you pass anything with this home occupation, to please come out and take a look. And I'll be happy to pay for a helicopter ride, which I took the other day, and it's about the only spot on the entire island I could see that's destroyed in the way it is. Secondly, I'd like to talk about what you were just discussing about the profitability of this and selling these lands after 5 years. If you're going to allow 6 to 8 houses to be built on an area and then sell it and not change it, it just seems like you're giving rights to somebody and destroying the Gullah heritage. This seems like it's feeding the people that have and not the people that have not. Because the people that have the property have profited over this over the years, selling a lot of these. And I've had this conversation with Levon, and he knows what I'm talking about, that they've put themselves in a position of making a lot of money, the people that have profited, and then shrunk the community. And to destroy the Gullah heritage over development usage, I think you've got a big issue in doing that. We love the Gullah community out here. I've lived here for 40 years on this island, over 40 years. I've lived in Oak Marsh for 24 years. The property next to us was treed. It was beautiful. Mr. Charlie and Miss Rosa had a ball field up front for the kids. And in the last 2 years, a trucking company has come in and started doing commercial truck work there. The marsh has been destroyed. The land has been stripped of all its trees. We used to have a pig, a cow, and a goat next door. And now we have trucks roaming in and off the property on a daily basis. Same thing that's going on at Arbor Nature. And you guys are fighting that now. If you allow this to go through without any checks and balances on the home occupation laws, you're going to have some huge issues with the destruction of the environment and the destruction of the marsh and destruction of the community.
Mr. Smith, I think you need to sum up.
Yeah, that's my time is up. I heard the bell ringing there.
Yeah.
But I would
Right,
love to
thank you
invite
for-
you all to come out. Levon hasn't come out. No one has come out from the committees to look at this destruction. And I think before you make any decisions on this, Levon has my phone number. David Ames has my phone number, and you guys can come out and take a look at it and see for yourself what it's done. It's 2 years. We have pictures before and after, and you can come take a look at it. We invite you today. It's low tide right now. Come on out after the meeting.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to circle back to the committee members for comments and further discussion, starting with Mike.
I have no questions or real comments at this point. May later, but that's it for now.
Okay, Todd?
No other questions. I think this access right away will probably need to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I did want to ask, I guess, ask the staff in terms of, are there any changes to what's allowed for commercial requirements as a part of these amendments? Or home occupations, as was brought up?
The home occupation, for clarification's sake, has been removed from the amendments. I know that there was a request to revisit it at a later time, but right now it's before you. The home occupation section is not in there.
Okay.
That's why it hasn't been discussed today.
Okay, so we're not proposing that at
That's
this point. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think I had seen it, but I skipped it. Peter, do you have any comments that you want to add?
No, I made my concerns. I agree with Todd that we're probably going to have to look at that 20 feet right of way issue that just doesn't seem to be enough there.
Yeah, I agree too. I mean, we don't really want to add to the backlog of roads that have infrastructure problems. So do we want to direct staff to address that issue? We have this matter scheduled for another committee meeting.
Is Jeff Buckaloo still on?
Staff? Yep, there he is.
Yes.
Jeff, were you saying that 30 foot might be like a minimum that would be something that would be doable?
Yes, sir. Given the minimum roadway requirement for two-way travel being 20 feet and shoulders and drainage swells, et cetera, I think 30 is the minimum where you could fit all that you need to fit into the right of way.
And Leslie, I believe Councilmember Grant would like to say something.
Somebody needs to turn his mic on.
Yeah, Mark, you need to
Yeah,
unmute yourself.
I wasn't sure. I just wait. I wanted to add a couple comments. One, I just wanted to reiterate, some of the people, some of the people in my community who've been trying to do some things in terms of leave things for their family. They're not wealthy people. They just realized that, it's their challenges in terms of putting a home on their property, and they're not looking to sell. If you look at some of the roads that we've been dealing with in the past, you can look in Spanish Wells, you can look in Chaplin Community, Christopher Drive. You can look also off of Squire Pope Road, where the road, and this is what I will ask Jeff to do. Look at some of these roads. Look at in terms of because some of them are actually should be just one-way roads. And if they meet the standard of one-way roads, meaning you just pull in and you just go one way in and one way out, that might be something that would fit that particular standard, you know. And I will also ask too if he could do a sample drawing towards the LMO. For instance, what was brought up by Peter Christians or someone on the council committee. If it's going to take utilities to go in, if it's going to take sewer, give us a sample of how that would look so that when people in the community want to understand why you're taking so much of my property to put a road in, they can visually see all the things that goes in to create this so-called buffer and setback. You know, if they can see that, then maybe they can understand why it has to be that way. You know, but that's my comment, and I thank you for your opportunity to speak.
Thank you. So I would imagine we're talking 20-foot paved with a 30-foot
20
right
foot,
of way is
25.
what you're talking. That's what you're talking. But I mean, so
Yes.
with Jeff, with a 30-foot right of way with a 20-foot paved with the
Yes,
utilities.
whether it's paved or the all weather surface,
Yeah,
typically
right,
that's the crushed stone and
right,
compacted. But right, the roadway width for two-way traffic for vehicles to pass needs to be 20 foot wide.
right. Which is,
Yes,
I mean, which is what's proposed anyway. We're just talking the
And,
right of way on either side of the access road.
and Jeff, this would be in anticipation that at some point, the owner of the property may ask that these roads be dedicated.
Right.
Correct. That's where the rub will come in. If in the future the residents wish to convey the road to the town and make it a public right of way, then if we're responsible to maintain the road, the shoulders, the drainage, et cetera, and there's not enough room, then it will become a matter of trying to acquire strips of land from the private properties on the side.
Which will further exacerbate the setback issue because, you'll be set back, the setback will be dissolved because you'll be taking up additional road right of way. And
Right, it'll become difficult.
It would just seem that, to deal with this up front because that's a potential down the road that can be a headache.
Yes,
I
sir.
think in addition, what Jahida said, I thought she even threw out the word 25 foot, but for a fire access, whether it's one way or two way, I think it's a minimum of 20-foot travel space, right, Jahida, in terms of the fire truck needs that 20 foot by code to be able to hold the weight of a fire truck.
So typically, if it is two-way, 20 feet is the minimum. If it's one way, but it can't be one way where you would say just one car is going to drive down it at a time. It has to be truly one way where you go in one way, you come out somewhere else. We allow those to be 14 feet. So, we do have a few subdivisions where they do have an in and an out. But typically, I think that sometimes becomes a problem because whoever is at the first house doesn't want to drive to the end to get out, and so then they do start driving two-way. So, you could have a one-way that is 14, but it has to have an in and out, and it has to actually function as a one-way.
But haven't you in the past for a fire lane required that to be 20 feet?
So yes, typically, like there are, in most commercial areas, like they are 20 feet because they are two-way. Like if you come in and out, then those one-way areas become 14 feet to come in and out of like a commercial development. But if you did go down to a 14-foot, you'd want to at least have 20 feet clearance to be able to put the outriggers out to be able to use the fire apparatus. I mean, that's where the 20 feet really comes into play for us, is if we have to put the outriggers out for the ladder truck, it has to have 20 feet to stabilize itself. And so, that can take place, like if you have a 14 feet, but you have the space on the side of it that's grass, then at least we can put them out and stabilize.
So and again, in our task force, what we tried to do was just to be consistent in that language, and that's why the 20 feet is there, and also trying to get the maximum use out of the parcel that is there as well. So, because a lot of these parcels are not that big or not, they're not perfectly shaped or ideal. So that's where a lot of this discussion has come from. The 20 feet at this point seems to be acceptable.
I think the difference is, Levon, when it's a right of way, that's typically where the utilities run through.
Yep.
If it's an easement, the utilities could come in another direction, kind of thing. And maybe it's worthwhile, I don't know who does this, if Jeff, if there's a couple section examples, as Councilman Grant had suggested, that, what would the road profile look like for a two-way road and one for a single one-way road?
And that would be the answer to how it would impact the total acreage or the density on that property.
Well, it would help establish, if it's a one-way road, the right-of-way width versus a two-way road right-of-way width.
And Johaida, is there a difference between a 20-foot fire right-of-way access and a true roadway?
No, because the way the fire code reads is that fire department access needs to be 20 feet wide. So really, like a driveway, what gets called a driveway, because some of our access easements really look like driveways, it's still fire department access because we use it to get places.
Okay, and I would join with Todd and Councilmember Grant that, if Jeff, you could profile some roads with a road right of way to show utilities, I think that would be very, very helpful in the discussion, and to demonstrate, exactly, what the concerns are.
And then you got to look at the reduction in setback if down the road the town takes over the.
And what I don't want to see is that down the road we end up with an issue with the town not wanting to take over the road right of way because it doesn't qualify, or they need to take additional property from the landowner in order to establish that right of way.
Right. Any other comments, discussion, revisions? If you, do I hear a motion on these amendments, or I'm thinking we want to wait till we get the additional information for our September 23rd meeting? Is that doable, Jeff?
Yes. Again.
Okay. Do I have a consensus from our committee members?
I think, would the question be everything else? We feel like everything else is pretty good, so that would be the only item to consider at the next meeting.
Mike?
Yes, I'd go along with that.
Yeah, with the except thing, I had asked that one, instead of saying person dwelling, saying person living, if that amendment could be made, I think it's clearer. But I don't have anything else either. This is the one concern that's out there, that we need more information. And the last thing I also want to ask Dr. DuBose, when you did conceptual plans on theoretical sites, you were drawing those up with just the 20-foot wide? Did you ever do it with a 30-foot right away?
Those were a while ago. I believe, I want to say that they were done with 30-foot right of way because that was what fire and rescue were comfortable doing at that time.
Okay.
Haven't done it. Yeah.
Okay, but then as a result, there's reduced setbacks and increased density and what have you, so.
The question of 20 feet just came up a couple of weeks ago in our task force meeting.
Gotcha.
So again, if we have some answers as to that question or why it can be 20 feet or why it can't be or what's best, that's
All right.
what you have in before you now.
All right, and then particularly since this goes to, public safety, public health, I think it's important we get the additional input from the engineering staff. So if no one else wants additional information, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Leslie.
Yeah, I'll second.
And second? Okay, thank you, everybody.
Good discussion.
Thank you.
To be continued. Take care.